guest also represents the Raif Badawi Foundation for Freedom of Thought and is based in Switzerland. The next guest is Mr. Pierre-Arnaud Perruti, EHF Executive Director from Belgium. Mr. Jacek Tabisz, the President of the Polish Rationalist Association. And last but not least, Mrs. Ewa Wójciak, Polish actress and theater director. I'm really sorry that your last one, it was the alphabetical order. And I would also like to invite Mr. Andrzej Dominiczek, the chair of the Polish Humanists Association, who will be co-chairing this panel with me. So I think this is a very, very important topic for all of us. The freedom of expression is one of the basic human values, humanist values. However, we don't always agree on whether it has any limits, whether it should have any limits or not. So I think our guests here actually have some kind of an opinion already. So I would like to commence this discussion with each of you actually taking about 5 minutes to say, to address the topic. Later on we would go more in details, more in the discussion, and of course there will be questions asked. I think this time we should have more time. I'm really sorry, I will start with this side of the room this time. And I think Andrzej would like to say a few words now as well, or would you like to share your opinion on the topic? Or?
No, I'm only the coach.
Okay, so let's start.
Nice to meet you. I'm very honored to be here. Because of kind of discipline we have now to be as short as possible, I think I will say in Polish and I count on the help of translators. Maybe it will be just faster and easier. Especially that I'm very emotionally engaged in the theme. I wanted to start to tell that przepraszam, miałam mówić po polsku. Polska ma coś, czego nie mają inne kraje zachodnie zwłaszcza, ale również te ze wschodniej Europy. Mianowicie Polska ma Kościół i religię, które nigdzie indziej nie mają takiej siły i takiego wpływu na życie obywateli i na państwo. Ja sporo podróżuję i pracuję ostatnie 2 lata, właśnie bardzo wiele warsztatów i spotkań z młodzieżą artystyczną odbyłam ze swoim teatrem właśnie we wschodniej Europie. Stąd wiem, że nawet Chorwacja, która ma bardzo podobny system, jest państwem głęboko katolickim, konkordatowym i wydawałoby się jeszcze, zwłaszcza po wojnie, takim bardzo, no, z tradycjami takimi narodowymi, nacjonalistycznymi, ale naprawdę nikt inny nie ma takiej zjawiskowej i bym powiedziała takiej artystycznej wersji zaangażowania religijnego, jakie wykazuje polskie społeczeństwo. Podam przykład, bo wszyscy tutaj jesteśmy bardzo, poprzednicy byli bardzo precyzyjni, intelektualni, a w związku z tym, żeby trochę atmosferę sprawić ją lżejszą, opowiem o tym, jak byłam na takim krótkim, parodniowym pobycie w Atenach, właściwie pod Atenami, w takim hotelu nad morzem. I 3 maja przybyła tam polska wycieczka. 3 maja, czyli w święto Konstytucji. I polska wycieczka przyjechała ze swoim księdzem, ze swoim zestawem tym tam do mszy, do robienia i urządziła w przestrzeni barowo-recepcyjnej mszę. Za szybą chodzili klienci hotelu w kostiumach kąpielowych, bo był basen, A polska wycieczka w całości modliła się w przestrzeni barowo-recepcyjnej. Myślę, że naprawdę tego nikt nie zna. Mówię o tym, ponieważ no, oczywiście tu jest główny fokus ekspresji artystycznej i wolności słowa. To znaczy w Polsce ten problem dotyczy głównie słynnego kodeksu karnego, paragrafu bodaj 196 o obrazie uczuć religijnych. I to rzeczywiście funkcjonuje i to rzeczywiście jest miecz na głowy artystów, ponieważ no, zwłaszcza dziś, kiedy rządzi nami partia, która nazywa się Peace and Justice, wiadomo, Law and Justice, sorry, absolutely not peace, Law and Justice, to jest bardzo egzekwowane i w związku z tym bardzo wielu artystów subiektywnie przekracza ten próg wolności słowa. Oczywiście to jest bardzo trudne do interpretacji, to jest bardzo śliskie, to jest bardzo fałszywe to pojęcie uczuć religijnych, ale niestety zostało zatwierdzone też przez Trybunał Konstytucyjny i to nie ten, który mamy teraz, ten taki groteskowy, tylko ten wcześniejszy, demokratyczny Trybunał Konstytucyjny, że otóż jest coś takiego jak uczucia religijne i one w zasadzie należą się ludziom wierzącym wyłącznie. Nie są obejmowani problemem obrazy uczuć ateiści czy wolnomyśliciele. Także wiemy, że los wielu bardzo ludzi zawisł mocno, ponieważ większość tych spraw dotąd była umarzana. Ja sama byłam też oskarżona o obrazę uczuć religijnych, o obrazę głowy państwa. Udało się to prokuraturze zamknąć w Poznaniu, ale myślę, że teraz otworzyła się droga do tego, żeby takie sprawy się kontynuowały, rzeczy trafiały do sądów no i za chwilę sądy też będą już orzekały inaczej, bo dotąd większość spraw z tego zarzutu była, jeżeli prokuratura kierowała do sądów, to sądy to umarzały. Aczkolwiek oczywiście znamy takie przypadki jak przypadek Małgorzaty Nieznalskiej, która poniosła olbrzymie konsekwencje, olbrzymie konsekwencje oskarżenia o naruszenie właśnie uczuć religijnych w dziele sztuki. Tak? Także myślę, że to...
Maybe you could actually share some more details on that, because I don't think people know the story.
Of Dorota Nieznalska. She's an artist, a sculpturist, was kind of something in between of painting and sculpture. And she put ona po prostu, to był słynny obraz genitaliów męskich zawieszonych na krzyżu.
Ale nie w erekcji, to jest ważne.
To jest ważne nawet, tak?
Sama to mówiła, że to nie w erekcji.
Aha, że to... No w każdym razie nie w erekcji.
The cross was not erected. I talked to her and she told me that it was important that it was not erected.
Także no to jeszcze bardziej podkreśla taką irracjonalność i jakąś taką atmosferę rzeczywiście średniowieczną tego prawa, które funkcjonuje jednakowoż, ponieważ Nieznalska przez wiele lat procesowała się, była rzeczywiście poważnie szykanowana, zapłaciła za to, myślę, życiem psychicznym i pieniędzmi i teraz otwarła się droga do tego, aby tego typu procesy stały się już właściwie codziennością. Także to miało być 5 minut, wobec tego ja skończę, nawet jeżeli nie powiedziałam wszystkiego, to jeszcze rozumiem, dostanę szansę.
For me, freedom of speech and freedom of expression, they are one of the most important values in our European civilization. So I am always for that values. And when I am listening from time to time that we must censor freedom of speech because of some political correctness, of some populistic danger, I don't agree. For me, freedom of speech is more important than everything what we can do with political correctness. So I am very sad that today in Europe and in Canada, for example, freedom of speech is in big danger from time to time. Of course, I know that we must fight with populists and with wrong information in the press, in the media, in the political speech, but to censor the speech or artistic expression is not a good way to fight. We must find another way to fight. And of course, it exists another solution, that it can be some blockade for some speech with hatred, with very wrong information, but always it will be with a lot of political pressure and with a lot of pressure of the mode, what is popular in this moment, in this people, with these people. I give you some examples. First examples, Eva speech about it, they are religion. They are just religion. If we are, for example, we say it's not possible to say publicly that all Arabs are raper or thieves, or all Poles are thieves or murderers, or all German are Nazi, or something like that. If we say it's not possible to say like that, it's not allowed, in my opinion, to have just and reasonable law of some censored information, we must say that it's not possible to say that people who don't believe are wrong, are bad, are without spirit, they are not people. We can't say, like in Quran, that Jewish people are bad and Allah will be very funny because they see these people deaf. Of course, this problem is also in another religion. In Christian religion also is some hatred speech about Jewish people, especially when it's judgment of Jesus Christ with Pilatus. And in some moment, Jewish people, not really Jewish people, but in the story say, we take courses for us and for our children, crucified him. Yes, and because of this speech, this is a speech of hatred, Christians, for many hundreds of years, was very huge anti-Semites. This is also, not only this, but also this, is base for Nazi politics who, you know, make Holocaust. If you read, for example, Martin Luther, now this is an anniversary of Protestantism, I like very much Protestants' art. For example, in Wroclaw we had a very beautiful festival of Mendelssohn. He was a Jewish man who after go to be Protestant, not him but his father, and he write very beautiful Protestant music. But Martin Luther was anti-Semite. In the end of his life, he write about Jewish people such awful and hatred things that even Mein Kampf is not such strong. Really, you can read it. It's possible. Yes, but if someone say we must censor, for example, if someone speak that black people are stupid because they are black, it's not true, of course. Or white people are stupid. They are white trash, especially this American who vote for Trump. It's also hatred speech. So we must also block this Martin Luther thinking. We must block the words from Quran, from New Evangelium, from Old Testament, Old Jewish Torah, from Hindu Manusmriti. This is very wrong thing about women in Manusmriti, and this is also holy book for Hindu people, for many Hindu people. So we must block. And another problem with some censored information, some political correctness, this is problem of justice. Because in Poland we have some organization Stop Discrimination, Stop Hate Stop, no more hate. And it was many doubt about this organization, because some people say this organization fight only when right-wing people say something populistic and some speech of hatred about left-wing people. But if left-wing people say something populistic and with speech of hatred about right-wing people, is no problem for this organization. It's not true, because this organization finally, for example, defend our very bad president. He's like marionette Andrzej Duda. But when left-wing side write too much about Andrzej Duda, they also protest. So this is only example how people to see that, not how it's exactly. But for example, for time to time I read the press, yeah, and I read, for example, that Alternative für Deutschland, they are Nazi or neo-Nazi. I don't like Alternative für Deutschland, but I am sure that they are not in 100% neo-Nazi or Nazi. I think that maybe 10-20% of these people are some sympathy with Nazi ideology. Not all people who don't like migrants are Nazi. This is just opinion. So this is opinion, but this is if someone's like political correctness. This is also speech of hatred. If someone say about Alternative für Deutschland that they are Nazi, if someone say that Wilders is fascist, etc., etc. So to applicate some political correctness really, it must be censored not only some wrong words about Arabs, about Jews, but also wrong words about Alternative für Deutschland, about Catholic Church, about even very conservative Jewish Orthodox, but still stay the problem with speech of hatred in religion books, holy books, in the base of religion. Of course, for time to time, this is only, some people say, we don't understand New Testament literally, or Old Testament especially. And for time to time, I believe this is like that, okay. But, for example, some Muslims, very, not all Muslim, but quite important part of Muslim, they must understand Quran literally, not like metaphor, not like allegory. This is problem. And even when you have Anglican Church, very liberal, very open, if some parents give children, young children, the Old Testament, with this all cruel and terrible sins from this is not ethical, really, if you understand this not metaphorically, and I don't believe too much in this metaphorically understanding, but some Christians say like this, so I respect, of course, this, but when children take it, even from the room of father and read it, it can disturb the psychic this child. So this is problem.
Thank you. Yeah, freedom of expression, freedom of thought and expression are obviously very core humanist values, and this is no wonder because through history, secularist humanists found themselves in a position of countries where the dominant religion or the dominant state was very much against their ideas, so it's no wonder that they cherish this freedom more than others. And it is true that in Europe we can consider ourselves lucky because the space for freedom of expression is pretty good. Even though in some countries that are not that far from here, it is dangerous. I'm thinking about Russia, of course, but also about Turkey. In those countries you can go to prison for expressing yourself or even get killed. And I'm not even talking about further countries. I mean, maybe you will talk about these countries where you can easily be killed, either by the government or by people who simply disagree with you. So, of course, we all agree about freedom of expression, but what about the limits, since the limits was your questions? I think it is important to say that freedom of expression includes the freedom to express ideas that shock or disturb or worry a part of the population. And I'm not using these words by accident, because they are the words of the European Court of Human Rights. And of course, freedom of expression is even more important for these ideas, because otherwise everyone agrees. So it's exactly where you speak about these things that may be shocking for someone or disturbing for someone, there you need freedom of expression. And again, it's pretty large, pretty well defended in Europe, but there are limits. There are legal limits. Roughly speaking, very shortly, there are two kinds of limits. First, the protection of people, that's where laws on defamation or insult come, so you cannot insult someone publicly, or to protect groups of people, and that's where hate speech comes. You cannot, as you just mentioned, you cannot propagate hate speech. But then again, even on hate speech, it's a clear limitation of your freedom of expression. There are different cultural approaches. The way the American, or maybe even in the UK, look at hate speech is different than in other European countries. So you might have slight differences on that. So two or three things that are very important to keep in mind for me when we talk about limits. First is that it's people who are protected. It's not ideas. So you can not propagate, you cannot express hate speech against people, but you're free to criticize or to mock or to ridicule religions. Religions don't have rights. That's fundamental. The other thing is that you should keep in mind that there is no right not to be offended. There are many ways to feel offended. You can be offended by a comment critical of your religion, but many times I'm offended by a commercial. A naked woman to sell a car or to sell oranges, I find it offending for women. So there is no right to be offended. Many people are offended for many different reasons, and if we have to stop because people feel offended, then we cannot say anything anymore. And the third part, of course, when I'm saying that the space for freedom of expression is pretty good in Europe, there are still many countries that experience blasphemy laws, and that's a clear limitation, and that's a danger. And sometimes we can think it's somehow theoretical, but in some countries it's not. Certainly not in Poland, it's not theoretical, you mentioned it, not even talking about Russia and Turkey. So it's important to keep in mind that we have to fight against these laws and to show these countries how ridiculous they are and from another age, really. So there is a great space for freedom of expression. There are many channels to express yourselves, but the main thing about limitations, it's that the question of social responsibility. By that I mean that it's not because you have a right to say something that it's always a good idea to say it. And here comes the tricky part, because sometimes it's, even if you have the right to say it and you know you will offend people, it's a good idea to say it. And sometimes it's a good idea to show restraint. So this question of social responsibility is tricky, because if you fall on the other side of the argument, you could say, okay, you need to be socially responsible, so you cannot say this, and that's of course not acceptable. If you take the example of art, art is not there to be socially responsible. Art is there to provoke, art is there to find new ways, to maybe to make you look at things from a different angle, just to explore things. So art doesn't have to be socially responsible, but sometimes we have to be, and that this is part of the discussion we will have, I think, in this panel.
Good morning, everyone. Wake up. I see some sleepy faces here, so it's not the time. We'll have a long day. Kaya, thank you very much for the introduction, but you didn't mention that I come from Morocco. So Morocco, not Monaco, North Africa. And I have been living as a political refugee in Switzerland since 2011. The discussion is quite interesting, but I would like to... I found that we are talking more about the means and the ways of classical traditional censorship, which is mostly coming from state or from a religion or from a certain authoritarian regime. This is another thing, and this is another debate. But for me, political correctness per se as a phenomena, which is now started to be invading the political debate. This is not a law, there is not a set of political correct words or rules that we could find somewhere written, but it's a culture which is started in the United States, in the campuses, etc. The idea of political correctness, the people who support this ideology or this instrument, is that they want to defend minorities, and by defending minorities, they want to do anything, even censoring freedom of speech. So, of course, we have seen that when we are confronted with in the public debate and this market of ideas, there are racist thoughts. There is hate speech. We cannot deny that. But the problem, how can we solve such problems? I believe in Western societies, and to a certain level, there is already existing institutional liberal bodies who are targeting certain hate speech. If I feel that I am offended or I'm discriminated, I go to the court, I go to the police, but I don't wait for a social justice warrior to come to me and tell me that, no, you don't have the right to say that, or you have to say this. The horrible thing, the catastrophe of political correctness as a culture of debate and of politics is that it's made racist people like Trump that they veil themselves under political correctness, so they defend themselves as not being politically correct. And this is very dangerous. Every populist or far right, I don't say problem with being right-wing or being conservative, it could still be okay, you could still have a debate, but I'm targeting here the far right. The moment they are confronted with an argument, then suddenly they use the political correctness as a card, as a defense mood. And this is wrong, because we started that. If we didn't start with political correctness as a discourse, as an ideology instrument, then we wouldn't have got to this situation. The other problem with political correctness is the name itself. It comes from the assumption that there is something which we could predetermine as correct. And which means that there is a set which nobody knows, as I said at the beginning, a virtual set of moods, of discourse, of speech which is correct and the rest is not correct. So linguistically, there is a failure here. And the other problem with political correctness, in my opinion, is that it works on two sides. First, the moralization, and the Sprachhygiene, the hygiene language. So political moralization, it has polarized political debate in Europe very badly. I'll give you an example. We started now in the recent years to talk about refugees and immigration. The people who would be critical to such debate, or they would oppose it, I don't believe, as has been said, that there are automatically or bad people, or they have concerns, they are asking questions and they want answers for them. Political correctness immediately put these people to the right, and it doesn't stop there. It goes further. Populists, and then further Nazi, and the dangerous thing is those the people we don't talk with, those the people we don't debate with, those the people we have won the cultural and the war, and we are right, and we are dogmatic. So we are not open anymore for new ideas, for new debate. And that's what bothers me the most here in the political European debate. Another thing is also, the question of immigration again. It's our failure, to be honest with you. It's not the failure of the populists. It's the failures of the liberals, because since the 60s and the 70s, we have been welcoming immigration, right? But the people who were welcoming immigrants, were the first to be against integrating them under the name of cultural relativism and under the name of cultural speciality, that not the same rules don't apply to everyone. So I don't have, the people, if you have no problem with having new cultures, which mostly, and especially from the Muslim world, which are not compatible with the understanding of human rights universally. So of course there will be a conflict. So if I come and I introduce a program of integration, and I want those people to welcome them, but I wanted to include them in the society, not to exclude them and think that they are people with special needs and special treatment, then I get all again accused of racism, Islamophobia, or xenophobia. So those are the debates which I believe we should open a discussion about, and we should also guarantee freedom of speech, and we should, in the same time, empower the liberal institutions, because they are the only institution which could guarantee and which could show us what is hate speech and what is not, what is racism and what is not, and not someone from a campus or an academic or someone who would use the power of words or power of abstract concepts on me to censor me, because people are afraid to speak. They are afraid to tell what they think, but when they go to vote, to the ballots, they choose the extreme, because they are confused. And even the political correctness fans or camp, they are in confusion now. In Germany, for example, famous newspaper from the left, they made a series of articles, and they said, did we go too far with political correctness? Because, right, as I said, I mean, you cannot express an opinion without being categorized, without being in this kind of moralization of thoughts and ideas. So I wish to open the discussion about this, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Kasem. This is actually the direction I would like the discussion to continue. There are other important topics, like you've mentioned, well, the issues that several countries have with freedom of expression, which is suppressed by certain laws, like the law that we have in Poland, which doesn't allow freedom of expression when it comes to criticizing religion, really. Jacek mentioned that the problem is that there is so much hate speech inside the holy books, which is true. So we have laws now which would not permit the hate speech, but they don't touch the holy books at all. So I'm very happy, Gerardo, that you actually mentioned about the legal boundaries that there are. But the real issue is that we actually create other boundaries, as Kasem said, that we actually start using those labels of Nazi, fascist, populist towards anyone who says something different than we agree with. So if you could maybe all actually comment on this topic, on political correctness. So let's start with you, please.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with you, and I think there's a trap in using political correctness, and we shouldn't fall into this trap, because American conservatives has been very good at portraying themselves as victims. Oh, you know, look at them, these political correct guys. I cannot even say nigger anymore, or maybe in the UK will be packy, you know, or maybe queer. So you know all this bullshit. Okay, no, that's not the issue here. It's not the issue. Nobody will sue you if you use the word queer or nigger. The question behind it is that they portray themselves as victims and use these words, and they just want to avoid the real questions that are behind it. So it's just a trick. It's a rhetorical trick. And I think there could be some. I think for me the main issue is not the boundaries or the threat that people put on you because they will call you Nazi or anything else. It's the real issue of naming things properly. That's the main issue behind it. Because when you name things, language is very important because it will orient the way you think or the way you put questions, and that's very important. So it's more the question of using the right words to describe something without being afraid of offending people. But as soon as you start to be politically correct, or be labeled to be politically correct, I think there's a problem. So I think we should, my proposition would be to drop at all this political correctness angle, because it will leave us in a dead end. But again, I think it's from a personal responsibility of each person to decide which words you use. If I refer to homosexual people, gay people, I won't use the word queer because I find it offending. But there could even be some gay people who don't find it offending. They think it's just funny and they don't care, basically. So, but if you want to address the issue of LGBTI rights or situation, the issue behind is much more important than the actual word you use. But we should be careful. That's my point for now.
So I repeat one time more that political correctness is very dangerous, and today this boom of populistic party of some real, from time to time, fascist idea, but I still don't believe that in the United States or in Europe is many fascists. No, it's not true. Maybe after some 10, 20 years, I hope that no. Now we have some extreme right from time to time. We have some populists who like to have power, but we must remember that we have also populists on the left-wing side. They are also exist. Maybe they have not such many voice now, but after 20 years maybe the situation change. And Rationalists, for example, will feel more in right-wing side because of lefty populism. It's also possible. So political correctness is really very unjust. For example, very frequently I listen to the radio about music, and for example I listen to audition, then some men, white men, who love jazz much and who was very good musician, like to study with some master of jazz, black jazz. And he come and he sit with this jazzmen, and they say, no, go away, you don't study with us because you are white, and you must go, and you can't sit with us in the study. So political correctness don't work, because if political correctness work, it also racism, when white man can't study jazz with musician because he is white, or even he can't sit on the table with non-black musician. And you know that in the United States, of course, is a lot of racism, the white man contra black man, but also, of course, exists racism, the black man contra white man. And another thing, this is around the political correction, that, like in New Testament, the Jewish people, not really Jewish people, but literally this imaginary people, say that we take the courses for us and for our next generation. But from time to time, political correctness also works like that. Because I speak with American thinker, I very like United States, but this thinking I don't like too much. And I say, you see, this jazzman was not good for this white man, it was racism. And they say, but they was so many times discriminated. We was the colonialist, we was the imperialist. So they have more law to say that they hate white people or the white people are stupid than we have right to say that black people are stupid or not so good like white people. And for me this is very wrong thinking. Because of course our grandfathers, but not Polish grandfathers mostly, because we haven't colony or black slaves, and we are also white, like French people or English people. But even English people are not these people who established colony in India, who established colony in Africa. It's Finnish. For example, I live in Wroclaw, and mostly people in Wroclaw like very much German people. If we think this manner of neo-colonialists who built political correctness thinking in the United States, for example, if we think in this way, we must think that all German people are bad and they must give us all the time some things, and we can say about German people all worst thing because it was Second World War and it was Nazism some 70 years ago, so we have right. It's same thinking like American people thinking that black men can do more, can say more in a racist way than white men say. And this thinking is very dangerous also and unjust.
About political correctness, we are very political correctness now. Jacek is worried about the white people who are persecuted by black people. I think it's very theoretical still. I mean, there's not many left people who are full of hatred still. So we should not worry about the left-wing populists, left-wing haters. We still are confronted by right-wing, and I don't think that there's so few fascists in our country. I'm afraid that they are much more than we expected, and so I am on the side that we still have a lot of work with real censorship and behaving of people from the right wing with our religious roots in this society, which are very strong. what connected with our backgrounds, which is feudalistic. So I mean that Polish society, for many ages, we were slaves. So we are now in the beginning of being conscious and awake to understand what means many of humanistic ideas. So political correctness is too far for us for this moment, even if I of course understand that this is a part of discussion, European discussion. But for now I think that East European countries are mostly threatened by this right-wing policy and this brown shadows which are over this right-wing policy, and that this religious in maybe only one religion, I mean Catholic religion, has also such a big power that it's very dangerous also, and that this Polish Catholic Church is also very connected, very close to nationalistic and fascistic also ideas. There's such a difference between us.
I'd like to ask a question which may be a little long, but it's the only question I'm going to ask, so please forgive. This question relates to some degree to what has been already said, but it will introduce slightly different problem I have in humanist atheist circles over the last 15 years, which is a kind of threat to freedom of speech. Actually, in recent years, my main problem in humanism and atheism, especially in Poland, but not only in Poland, I know that because I talked to Belgian philosophers, for example, who have similar problem. Especially the problem concerns mainly academic circles, but since we try to cooperate closely with people from universities, especially philosophers, but not only, it becomes our social serious problem, and that's the problem of anti-science approach among many young atheists. When we established Polish Humanist Association at the same time, almost the same time, 25 years ago, and at the same time we launched a magazine called Without Dogma, defense of freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, freedom of expression was obviously our main field of interest. And we mainly criticized Polish church and Polish politicians who limited, especially in the 90s, situation was much worse than now, although it's still this provision of Article 196 is being occasionally implied, or at least there are efforts to do it. But in the 90s, even liberal newspapers refused really to criticize the church. So our magazine was really the only fully free magazine in all respects, not only about religion. But the situation has started to change a bit 10 years later, 10 to maybe 12 years later, when the new generation of mostly philosophers, atheist philosophers, either working or mostly working at the university or universities, joined the association and joined the editorial board of Without Dogma. The title is still the same, and it turned out that there are completely new problems and threats to democracy, mainly if we wanted to publish something from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, or something about freedom of inquiry, freedom of scientific research. I'll give you just two examples. The first one, the first time I translated an article by a Belgian philosopher, a woman feminist and atheist, Geert van der Massen, who wrote a book in English, actually, because she had problems to publish this book in Dutch. It was published in short version in Dutch later, titled Who is Afraid of Charles Darwin? her main idea was, there is another part of this title about feminism and science, I don't remember exactly, and the main idea of the book was that there is no contradiction between feminism and evolutionary psychology or evolutionary explanations of human behavior, culture, and so on. So the whole very scientific, but at the same time hot, I would say, really emotional book is that there is no contradiction. Of course, it can be debated. I don't think there is a contradiction. I am a feminist and not only atheist, of course. But someone may disagree with it, and we could have very interesting discussion in Without Dogma or during the panels or conferences. But the problem was that they refused to publish this article because it was unacceptable and still is unacceptable to them to even publish an article with raising that kind of question and discussing it. I didn't say that it should be our official position. I just wanted to publish an article. We had half a year quarrel, really very serious quarrel. Fortunately, at that time, the founder of this Without Dogma was a very famous professor, one of the most important Polish atheist philosophers, and she was of my opinion that we should have almost practically completely full freedom of speech. So thanks to the fact that she was still in the board of the magazine, we managed finally, after half a year of quarrels, to publish this article. But she was so fed up with this position of this new, mostly left-wing or left-liberal atheist, that she decided to leave our magazine, although she was the founder of it, because she didn't feel like having that kind of quarrels. And about half a year later, I wanted to publish an article by Peter Singer, famous, probably the most famous atheist in the world, atheist, progressive, and so on and so on. The article defended the right of scientists to conduct studies on race and IQ. It was a hot debate in England, mainly because one scientist was really strongly discriminated because he mentioned the results of these studies. And again, I understand the argument that that kind of studies are sensitive from the point of view, not only political correctness, from the point of view of social responsibility, and we can discuss it, and perhaps even some very extreme examples might be censored. I don't know, I wouldn't do it, but I can understand that we can have a discussion, but the editorial board of the magazine called Without Dogma refused to publish this article. Peter Singer was called fascist, of course, although he didn't write about his own case. He defended the right of other scientists who conduct that kind of studies. He doesn't do it. He just... So, quite recently I had an interview for our Racjonalista.tv, and I just mentioned the studies, cross-cultural studies, which showed that women are not more religious than men in the countries where majority religions do not pay much attention to afterlife. So it was found that in China and Israel, in those two religious traditions, the importance of afterlife is minor, or they do not pay attention to it. And it turned out that in those two countries, from the group of the countries which were studied, women, the number of believers among women and men is practically the same, while there is quite significant difference in most of the Christian countries. Not huge, but significant. And again, this woman, a scientist, sociologist, rebuked me. Oh, I wouldn't quote that kind of studies, and we had a short discussion whether studies can be quoted at all. It is obvious, to summarize, that there are, I think, more and more atheists, some of them consider themselves to be humanists also, who are actually, at the moment, really the biggest problem to publish something in terms of evolutionary psychology. The biggest opponent is not the church. Actually, the editor-in-chief of some Jesuit magazine, some time ago I spoke about this problem on the radio, and the other person was a Jesuit, this editor-in-chief. He proposed that he could publish this article in his Jesuit paper. I refuse. I don't want to be associated. But atheists, humanists, and refuse to publish the same article by Peter Singer. So my question, not only to the panelists, but to all of us, is what you think about it. I certainly think that I have very similar opinion to Peter Singer, not only in this article, because he also, maybe you have read, if you read Free Inquiry magazine, he also published an interesting article in which he defended the right to ridicule religion and to deny the Holocaust. He is from the Jewish family, from Austria, his family, and they suffered from the Holocaust. Actually, most of his family members from the Second World War generation were killed during the Holocaust, but he still refuses the right to deny the Holocaust. I will not summarize the article at the moment. I just want to show you how strong is my conviction that that freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and inquiry should be almost limitless. But I'm really curious what's the opinion of all of us, especially about this anti-science threat to freedom of speech, because I think it's growing. Thank you.
Shall I start? Okay. Andre, I disagree with you. I think the issue you raise is important, but I see more of it as a question of a battle of ideas more than an issue of freedom of expression. I see you don't agree, but that's great.
I mean, just one. For me, it would be what you say if they decided to publish the article and we would have a discussion, but they refuse to publish.
No, in my view, a newspaper has every right to refuse an article. That's their freedom as an editor. They can really refuse that. And I'll give you an example, a recent example in Belgium on a totally different subject. There was a man, a Lebanese activist living in Belgium called Abu Jaja, and he was a regular contributor to one of the main Flemish daily newspaper called The Standard. And in an article he wrote, he was telling about the story of a Palestinian who committed an attack on Israeli soldiers. And Abu Jaja in this article denied the fact that it was a terrorist attack. He said it was an act of resistance against an occupying force. Then I'm not debating the claim here, but the man was fired from The Standard. He was fired. The journal, the newspaper, fired him. And I hardly see it as a problem of freedom of expression, because this man has access to everything he wants. He has a very famous blog, people can read him. He has interview every week on many radio or TV. So it's not a problem of freedom of expression. A newspaper or a scientific magazine has the right to publish or not to publish an article, and that's not a problem of freedom of expression. That's a problem of battle of ideas, and the battle of ideas is full of examples of people leaving a magazine because they disagree with the editorial line, or creating new newspaper because they dissent. Or it's a problem of freedom of expression if you have nowhere to express yourself. But in the age of internet, of web TV, on radio TV, or whatever, it's so simple to express yourself. So unless it takes a proportion that you really have no space at all, it's getting dangerous to express an idea, which I don't think it's the case, but maybe I misrepresented the situation in Poland. Again, I don't think it's a freedom of expression issue, it's more a battle of ideas.
So you think that we in humanist circles or magazines should not discuss issues, should not or are not allowed really to discuss issues like this?
I certainly didn't say that. To the contrary, I think that these magazines are the place to discuss things. But if you're not happy, or it's the right of if you're owner of a magazine, it's your right to refuse an article. If you're not happy with that, you create your own magazine.
They refused generally.
Right.
Evolutionary psychological approach, because this is not tolerated by people who are politically correct.
I agree to a certain level, but not on the level of publishing or not publishing. I know there is a kind of ideological, academical left which tries even to switch scientific facts in order to defend that or this or what they would call minorities. I won't argue more about that, but I would see it in the cultural life, for example. In Switzerland, let's say, or in Berlin or wherever, the cultural life, theaters, museums, and where you could have debates about philosophy and certain controversial issues, mostly those places are run by the left. And for me, for example, as someone coming from Morocco, and the contradiction or the funny fact, I was a radical leftist in Morocco. And the left for me there still represented a progressive power for freedom of speech, for religious freedom, and it was the only, let's say, political instrument to counter Islamism. Suddenly when I came to Europe, I find the opposite. I find that those who call themselves conservative or right-wing are the ones who are addressing issues which are priority for me, and which I think are really, they have their fair share of, they need to have their fair share of public debates. A friend of mine, a very well-known poet, recently gave an interview in Zurich, he's Swiss, about that we should have a discussion about Islamism, we should have a discussion about the women in Islam and also immigration from a liberal perspective. He was bashed. He was called all with nasty adjectives and described like he's turning right. And the problem, many people, he told me, they stopped inviting him, as they used to do before, to those cultural debates or poetry evenings, etc. The problem here, the left is not necessarily our ally in this fight for liberalism, because it's also another ideological instrument which prefers or which wants to see the world from a specific corner. Going back to the topic of freedom of speech and political correctness, I am someone who believes that we have to fight speech with speech, and we don't have to create a martyr for freedom of speech. Even those people who express certain, like for example, in the US, people that we could probably to a certain level agree that they are normal people, they're not right. Ayan Hirsi Ali, for example, she has been banned several times from giving public talks at universities. And this is, unfortunately, is coming from students who should actually be the first to encourage free debate and come and counter Ali Hirsi Ali if provoke her, tell her what do you think, because she's coming to debate you, she's not coming to talk and leave. So that's the important thing. Another thing, being atheist, at least this is really very important in the Arab scene, and the people who come from ex-Muslims, and then now we are atheists. Being atheist is not necessarily you are liberal. The phenomenon we have now, and why we need really humanistic values, and really that's your duty also as international Europeans, with the rise of atheism in the Muslim world, we are searching for an alternative, and we are confronted with a lot of questions, and we are seeing how Islamist groups are using Europe as a backyard for their propaganda and for also their activities in our countries, and then we are questioning which are the powers and which are the political bodies in Europe or in the West which are against Islamism. The answer, the simple one that we cannot dispute about, is the right wing. We could argue and dispute about the ways they are doing, but where is the left, the liberal, the classical liberal position in order to tackle certain issues? Why do we have all the time, because of fear or because that's a priority for you, to ignore certain debates and certain issues? What is the humanistic approach to certain questions? And this should be shared with people from non-Muslim background in Muslim countries, atheists in Muslim countries. I wanted also to give a very good example of how we can, by the institutions of liberal governments or whatever, like we could counter hate speech and still we don't need political correctness. I give France as an example. France, with Charlie Hebdo, it accepts even blasphemy. I mean, Charlie Hebdo is very blasphemic, and it was publishing issue after an issue. There was never a problem with the state, even if there were some problems, but they never had to ban them or force them to make some self-censorship, etc. Even came the Islamic attack, and then Charlie Hebdo is not Charlie Hebdo anymore. They are not just with Charlie. So But we have another case in France, Dieudonné, if you have heard of him, the comedian. This comedian, for example, there was clear hate speech. There was kind of anti-Semitism, which was done here. The state interferes, and he was prosecuted. So we should our work should really focus on developing and protecting those liberal institutes. And in countries like Poland, which there's still, of course, a room for improvement, and for then this should be the battle. This should be the real work.
So Andrzej posed the question, and I tried to look from a little bit another point of view, because this was a question about science and what it's with science and freedom of speech and political correctness. Of course, for science, both are very dangerous from time to time. We participate in our association with many initiatives about fight with creationism. Dobrze. Creationism. Z naszym stowarzyszeniem bierzemy udział w bardzo...
It will be in Polish.
W naszym stowarzyszeniu bierzemy udział w bardzo wielu debatach dotyczących walki zwolenników nauki z kreacjonistami. No i tutaj oczywiście w takich tematach wolność słowa jest bardzo problematyczna, tak? Bo po prostu nauka nie zawsze jest taka bardzo atrakcyjna, nie zawsze ma siłę przebicia jako wspaniały, no nie wiem, godny przyjęcia produkt, taki jak, nie wiem, nowy samochód, czy ładny dom, czy pralka. Więc dla ludzi, którzy odebrali wykształcenie religijne jako nowonarodzeni chrześcijanie, oczywiście bardziej atrakcyjny jest kreacjonizm i ci ludzie dają dużo pieniędzy na to i przeważnie instytuty kreacjonistyczne w Stanach przynajmniej mają więcej środków niż zwykłe instytuty rzeczywiście zajmujące się biologią. No i to jest oczywiście problem z wolnością słowa, bo kusiłoby wręcz zakazać czy to kreacjonizmu, czy to występowania przeciwko szczepieniom, czy to wspierania homeopatii. No jest po prostu bardzo dużo takich tematów. No ale mi się wydaje, że tutaj jedynym rozwiązaniem jest rola państwa, żeby wspierać naukę, i rola mediów państwowych. I tutaj media państwowe to jest kolejny problem, bo ja tutaj się zgadzam oczywiście z Pierrem, że jednak redakcja ma prawo po prostu profilować swój przekaz, tak? Ale problemy się zaczynają wtedy, kiedy to nie jest redakcja prywatnego pisma, tylko jest to kanał państwowy. Jest to kanał telewizyjny państwowy lub gazeta państwowa, w niektórych państwach tak jest. No my w Polsce mamy problem, tu Ewa słusznie zauważyła, no przede wszystkim z prawicowym naciskiem na życie codzienne i tutaj media państwowe są przejęte przez no, pewien prawicowo-katolicko-konserwatywny punkt widzenia, który nie boi się odnosić też, używać postprawd, nieprawdy. I to jest nasz problem. No ale na przykład widząc, co się dzieje w Kanadzie, coraz bardziej się obawiam, że tam państwowe media będą z kolei przejęte przez drugą stronę, tak? No bo jeśli oni tam rozważają, że krytyka islamu miałaby być przestępstwem, no to mi się po prostu włos jeży na głowie. I jeśli powstaną rzeczywiście jakieś państwowe kanały informacji, które będą z takich założeń coś mówić, no to w tym momencie już nie jest tylko kwestia, że każda redakcja ma prawo do ustalenia swojego profilu, ale jest to kwestia gwałtu na społeczeństwie i niszczenia demokracji. Jeśli po prostu media państwowe są zbyt mocno przejęte przez lewicę, radykalną lewicę lub, co częściej się u nas dzieje, przez prawicę. U nas nie tyle radykalną, co po prostu populistyczną, tak, i antydemokratyczną. Wracając do nauki. Ostatnio. Oczywiście obok wolności słowa, której bym jednak bronił, problemem jest też polityczna poprawność. I tutaj no, Andrzej jakby dotknął tematu już takiego granicznego, tak? Że jest pismo, które jednak jakoś się przedstawia, i które w sumie powinno puścić ten tekst, bo po prostu się przedstawia jako pismo o takim profilu, że takie teksty powinny tam pójść, tak? No i w tym momencie oczywiście nauka ucierpiała z uwagi na to, że nie pasowała do ideologii, tak? Że nie pasowała w tym momencie do ideologii lewicowej, ale oczywiście równie dobrze nauka może nie pasować do ideologii prawicowej. Moim zdaniem ja zawsze bym stawał po stronie nauki, co oczywiście bywa trudne, no bo może się okazać, że według niektórych badań na przykład rzeczywiście są różnice między rasami, tak? I to jest trudny temat raczej dla lewicy, a nie dla prawicy. Może się okazać, że jednak kobiety i mężczyźni się bardzo różnią pod niektórymi względami, co też dla niektórych rodzajów feminizmu jest absolutnie nie do przyjęcia. Ja osobiście uważam, że kobiety i mężczyźni się różnią, ale powinni mieć równe prawa, chociaż niekoniecznie polegające na włożeniu obydwu osób, niezależnie od płci, w jedną formę, tak? No ale są takie rodzaje feminizmu, które są takie jakby radykalnie równościowe. No mi się wydaje, że jednak istnieją pewne różnice między płciami. Ale chodzi przede wszystkim o to, że nie wolno zakazywać badań. My w naszej telewizji, w naszych mediach mamy często przykłady z taką próbą ataku na wolność słowa. Na przykład puściliśmy właśnie Pawłowskiego bardzo takie kontrowersyjne rozważania na temat różnic między płciami wynikających z ewolucji, z psychologii ewolucyjnej. Pawłowski to jest jeden z wybitniejszych polskich biologów i ewolucjonistów zajmujących się tym ludzi. Jeden z najbardziej znanych, zresztą naukowiec roku, popularyzator nauki, taki naprawdę bardzo znany. No ale on w każdym razie przedstawił taki bardzo kontrowersyjny temat, ale przedstawił argumenty na jego rzecz. Później niektórzy czytelnicy zaczęli do tego nawiązywać, głównie prawicowi, i te nawiązania też były ciekawe. Ale w pewnym momencie pojawia się, że z kolei tutaj lewa strona nie może tego znieść po prostu. No ale niestety, jak jesteśmy zainteresowani nauką, to musimy po prostu godzić się na naukę, jaka jest. Czyli sprawdzamy tylko i wyłącznie poprawność metodologiczną badań. Na ile to jest hipoteza, na ile to jest teoria, a na ile to jest w ogóle bzdura, bo też tak bywa oczywiście. Ale jeśli jest to metodologicznie poprawne, to powinno, zwłaszcza w naukowym piśmie, niezależnie czy prywatnym, czy państwowym, to absolutnie powinno się znaleźć, nawet jeśli nie pasuje do żadnej ideologii.
It's been a very interesting discussion, and I think the topic is very vast, and perhaps we should actually have a full conference dedicated to this topic, because I suppose at least 20 people would like to ask their questions, and we have 15 minutes left. And perhaps we can shorten the trip by 15 minutes, so that we actually allow some more questions.
We're having too much time for trip.
Jacek is our guide, so he says no.
So please.
Okay, so
just be strict with the time you give to each speaker.
yes. So I will now allow 4 questions. Please don't speak more than 40 seconds. Please stand up, say your name and organization.
Hello, Zbigniew Szczęsny, Koalicja Ateistyczna, Atheist Coalition. I will speak English if you don't mind. So the big problem here, in my opinion, is that we would like to keep a cake and eat it. Generally, we would like to maintain narrative prevalence of reasoning in a liberal system where reasoning is somehow more and more treated as a hegemony. As a hegemonistic kind of building opinion, democracy does not necessarily accept this sort of preference. Religion, other systems of building up, constructing opinions are conquering the right for respect and to build its position in society. Jacek has told us a minute ago that science should keep this exceptional position, but why? Perhaps the society doesn't accept it anymore, and the society would like to build opinion in another way. Perhaps using a prophet or oracles, whatever. So we, a humanist society, has to really start thinking how we would like to make our position and how we would like to defend certain principles which our society is built upon through ages, but still maintain a value of multiculturalism and a value of, let's say, even of some religious spirituality. It's a very difficult topic. I read a lot of books and articles on this subject. I would encourage you to perhaps make a special conference on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few points that we will have to discuss further in other occasions. First of all, I don't think that the framework provided by the debate on political correctness is extremely helpful, because it was initiated at the time when the fight against cultural relativism implied that the lack of relativism would be being in tune with traditional positions, that you couldn't be relativist at the time when the debate was triggered, because you had to be Christian, for example, not because you had to respect the basic values of the Constitution. So I think that the framework has to be changed. We have to have a change of paradigm, even if I fully support most of the things that have been said against what was called political correction, political correctness. Second, self-restraint and civility are things that are different from any legal prohibition. Third, respect for the individuals is something different from the respect for any political, cultural, or religious position. Respect is due to individuals, not to any political or religious or cultural kind of philosophy. Fourth, freedom of the media, provided it is private media and not public media, implies that you are free to publish or not to publish whatever you want. Fifth, the people in a free society have the right to be superstitious, because there is no clear boundary that is possible to draw between religion and superstition. All religions were superstitions, considered superstitions at the beginning, but this does not imply that public policies should put on the same level scientific research and superstition. You can't allow people to be religious in the same measure in which you can't allow people to be superstitious. And finally, and this is the most important thing, I think that we lack credibility because we don't consider usually the threat of religious fundamentalism, and especially that of Islamic fundamentalists, as we would consider the threat coming from other religious fundamentalisms of the past. And the problem of minorities within minorities, the problem of not making any lack of differences among social groups is something that is really at the basis of a big problem that we have for our credibility. But we will have to discuss all these points, I think, further in the future.
Nina Sankari, Fundacja imienia Kazimierza Olsztyńskiego. Chciałabym się odnieść do tego, o czym mówił Kasem El-Ghazali i Jacek Tabisz też. Dosyć i na własnym przykładzie. Bardzo często byłam zapraszana przez różne lewicowe organizacje po to, żeby opowiadać, jak w Polsce Kościół niszczy prawa kobiet, niszczy prawa obywatelskie i to wszystko zawsze spotykało się z bardzo dobrym przyjęciem. Jeżeli jednak próbowałam dołączyć na zasadzie paraleli porównywać pewne zjawiska z islamem i krytykować również islam, natychmiast spotykałam się z bardzo dużym problemem, odrzuceniem i na przykład nie byłam więcej już zapraszana. Dlatego świetnie rozumiem, o czym mówi Qasem al-Ghazali. Ten sam problem sygnalizują wszyscy byli muzułmanie i Mariam Namazi, będąc tu u nas i tak dalej, i inni. Tylko chciałabym powiedzieć, nie można tego, jeśli chodzi o lewicę, nie można tego przypisywać radykalnej lewicy, no, bo ten odłam lewicy ma już swoją nazwę. Po angielsku to jest regressive left, po francusku to jest la gauche démissionnaire i chodzi tutaj o to, że po prostu powszechne, tak zwane uniwersalne wartości zostały zaprzeczone, o czym mówił mój przedmówca i tu bym widziała największy problem. Dziękuję.
Dzień dobry, moje nazwisko Radosław Czarnecki. Ja bym chciał zwrócić uwagę na zupełnie inny problem niż Państwo mówiliście wszyscy. Mówiliście o zagrożeniach dla wolności według świata Orwella, czyli opresji. A ja uważam, i może ktoś by się z Państwa odniósł do tego, może Pani Ewa Wójciak głównie, zagrożeniem dla wolności słowa i dla prawdy, że tak można powiedzieć, jest również świat według Huxleya, to znaczy infantylizacja przekazu, nadmiar informacji. Wszystko staje się banałem, karnawałem. Mamy nadmiar informacji i człowiek, który nie ma aparatu wybiórczego, się gubi.
Jutro o tym będziemy.
Ale ja mówię, to jest dzisiaj, w dzisiejszym świecie, jest to, uważam, o wiele większe zagrożenie dla wolności słowa i przekazu niż świat według Orwella. Wszystko jest banałem. Tylko tyle.
This will be actually the topic of the last panel tomorrow, so I'm going to give one more.
Thank you. I'll go back to the title, which we at some point kind of forgot. The argument of political correctness and freedom of expression. I agree that political correctness is loaded, but basically the question is, are there, and if so, which limits to freedom of expression? The question is, where do humanists stand? There's one thing I did not hear. We do not live in a world devoid of international treaties. There are treaties that define that, however imperfectly, in the UN, in the Council of Europe, and the European Union. When you want to discuss limits of freedom of expression, you have to address them within the framework of the ICCPR, the International Covenant for Civic and Political Rights, the International Convention for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the European Convention of Human Rights, and the case of the European Court, and the directive of the European Union to penalize some forms of hate speech, to simplify the term. It's within these ones that we can take a decision how far we approve and do not approve. Most of our countries have laws anyway about that. And this is the dimension which is important, first of all, because it's true, and I'm telling this to those who don't know, that we even in the Federation never have a stance on this issue. We have a stance against blasphemy, that's easy. We all agree, nobody protects religions, but individuals need to be protected. But what are the limits? For what? For a mere word, for incitement? These are the questions about it, maybe in a different meeting, but as a humanist, these are the bases that I want to discuss this issue. Thank you.
Would you like to answer some of those, comment on those?
Tomorrow.
Okay, so
Czy zostałam wywołana ja tutaj do odpowiedzi, ale usłyszałam, że jutro a ja jutro również jestem, więc zobowiązuję się.
I don't know if it can be answered, but I'm intrigued between the distinction that is made between editorial policy, to refuse an article, and an article in the Science magazine that is a battle of ideas. And the matter that you pointed, Jacek, saying, yes, but if a magazine is ruled by the state and it excludes articles, that's a problem. So I'm interested in I thought you were too quickly by saying that is a battle of ideas and not a wrong decision, because you prevent a debate on scientific research. So I was trying to, I wasn't satisfied, and I would like to maybe get a little bit more innovation in what the distinction is between the newspaper that is and the magazine, if possible. If not, we'll do it during the break if it's not possible.
It could be wrong, not published.
Well, I'm really sorry that we have to finish the discussion, but I do hope that we can continue talking about those things first during the break and later during other activities like the boat trip and the dinner, because these are all very important topics, and I think we actually need more discussion on all of these topics, really. So thank you very much. Thank you to our guests.